The bustling hum of the Galactic Council canteen filled the air, a symphony of clinking cutlery, low murmurs in dozens of alien tongues, and the occasional roar of laughter from a distant corner. Amidst the crowd, two figures sat opposite each other at a polished obsidian table, their forms casting long, angular shadows under the neon-lit canopy. What? Humans? Fighters? The younger alien's voice cracked with disbelief, his three eyes wide, almost incredulous. His slender fingers tapped nervously on the table, betraying the certainty in his tone. Those soft, peace-loving bipeds, always pushing diplomacy, always advocating peace. I can't imagine them in a real battle. A human passerby drifted nearby, shoulders squared and confident, eyes fixed on a small datapad. The younger alien watched him with puzzlement. How could they possibly be warriors? They seem so fragile, delicate even, he continued. Always preaching diplomacy, non-violence, treaties and, look at them in the archives. Blankets, music, art, peace marches. You're telling me they were the one to stop the Zarka? The senior's eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a slow, deliberate cadence. Boy, you sure skipped the history lessons, didn't you? Not only did they stop the Zarka, they almost wiped them out. The younger alien's eye widened almost to double. What? The elder alien leaned back with a dry chuckle. You see the softness, he said, swirling his nutrient brew, because you weren't alive when the skies burned. We all thought they were fragile. So did the Zarka. This all happened almost 1,000 years ago. Above the cradle of humanity, cloaked in cold void and shadowed starlight, the great warship of Zarka loomed in orbit. It sat like a blade above a heartbeat, surrounded by the silent procession of dreadwings and cruisers, their hulls whispering menace in the dark. Inside its obsidian-lined command chamber, the conquerors of 1,000 worlds gathered beneath the red-lit war interface, talons tapping over a cold steel dais, eyes reflecting planetary contours bathed in blue and green. Earth. It had appeared on conquest ledgers for several cycles, flagged as a low-threat sector with high biomass yields. But its timing was now optimal. Technologically backward, politically fractured, spiritually despondent. The perfect target. It was beautiful in the way prey sometimes is, verdant and spinning, chaotic and fragile. Oceans shimmered with careless life, forests breathed in tandem with unseen beasts, and storms coiled across continents like restless spirits. To the Zarka, it was not a world, it was a target. They were on a campaign of conquest, carving their dominion across the stars, world by world, system by system. Earth was next. A fractured, bickering species whose greatest monuments reached no higher than their petty skies. Back in the days, they had many flags. One planet, but thousands of borders. A civilization that had barely clawed its way into low orbit, still chained by atmosphere and ego. They didn't even know life outside Earth existed. It would be their first contact, and sadly, it was going to be a hostile one. On the Zarka ship, reports filed coldly. 213 unresolved border conflicts, at least a dozen ongoing civil wars and 3 active military engagements between neighbouring countries. No planetary government, no unified defence doctrine. Countless dialects, ideologies, currencies and faiths, all pulling against one another like tectonic plates before the quake. They hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel. By Zarka standards, they were still crawling through their cradle. So Operation Cradle Snare was initiated. The order descended without ceremony, without warning. Orbital dominance began within moments of re-entry. Earth's satellites, their so-called eyes in the sky, blinked out like candle flames smothered by a storm. Communications fell next, and within the hour, Earth had gone blind and mute. From pole to pole, there was no warning. No organized response. Only confusion, static, and the thin wail of emergency broadcasts fading into nothing. Just moments before, life had been ordinary. Beautifully, blissfully ordinary. Children laughed in playgrounds, lovers sipped coffee on rain-damp balconies, old men fed birds in the park. A grandfather lifted his giggling granddaughter into the air, spinning her as she shrieked with joy. A teacher scolded a student for drawing spaceships in the margins of his notebook. A wedding had just begun somewhere as the music swelled and the bride stepped forward. Then the sky fell. One moment, humanity was living. The next, they were fighting for it. Drop cruisers spilled from the upper atmosphere like metal locusts, precise and unrelenting. Major power centers were struck in coordinated silence. Global militaries, already stretched thin by internal strife, scrambled jets and fired missiles. Some defense systems activated in reflex, but most of them failed before achieving lock. Resistance was immediate but directionless, a scattered howl in the dark. Cities burned in sequence. Los Angeles crumbled beneath barrage fire, its streets turned into rivers of molten concrete as civilians fought back with rifles better suited for hunting game. In Seoul, sleek human mechs rose defiantly, only to be cut down, obsolete and noble. In Paris, soldiers stood in formation beneath crumbling arches as pulse blades carved through their lines. All across the earth, humans resisted, not together, not strategically, but with raw and burning instinct. And everywhere they fell. There was no global strategy. Nations acted independently, some with pride, some with desperation. The Terran Union, Earth's only fledgling attempt at transnational solidarity, remained mired in parliamentary gridlock. Their debates over emergency leadership protocols outlasted several entire battles. The Southern Hemispheres were razed next. Local militaries vanished before their governments could even issue orders. Fields turned to glass. Forests vanished in flame. Cities became ash within hours of contact. The ocean air was thick with the scent of burning fuel and metal. The sky darkened with soot and shattered satellites. Still, the Zarka continued their methodical advance, adjusting their forecasts downward. Earth was proving far easier to conquer than anticipated. By the third week, more than 1 billion human lives had been extinguished. Infrastructure collapse was nearly total. Entire governments had disappeared. Military coordination was broken, with only sporadic resistance flaring up in pockets. Most were desperate, doomed fights, militia bands, guerrilla cells, wounded soldiers defending the last corners of cities no longer mapped. Inside the command ship, the Zarka commanders analyzed the battlefield with mechanical detachment. Earth was collapsing as predicted. Primitive weapons, petty disputes, emotional instability. The perfect ingredients for swift subjugation. The projection wall bloomed red with conquered territories. The remaining free zones flickered like dying embers. To the Zarka, Earth was broken, but some things eluded scans. They didn't measure the defiance of a lone pilot who, when cornered, chose to ram his burning jet into a drop cruiser, sacrificing himself to down an entire squadron. They didn't register the medic who used her body to shield a child as fire rained down, whispering lullabies as the world turned white. They didn't see the technician, lungs black with smoke, who kept transmitting evacuation coordinates to other survivors until her signal fell silent forever. These weren't anomalies. They were seeds. The Zarka looked at this fractured species and saw only chaos. But under the weight of extinction, something else was stirring. Something harder to quantify. Grit, rage, will. The flickering pulse of a unity born not from governance but from fire and loss. Earth was shattered, but its pieces had teeth, and soon they would bite back. The Zarka had nearly conquered Earth. Most organized defense had collapsed. Governments lay in ruin. Only scattered resistance remained, stubborn pockets of defiance that refused to die. But these efforts were fractured, isolated, and uncoordinated. In the ruins of what was once the United States, ragtag militias used guerrilla tactics, striking swiftly from hidden tunnels and abandoned suburbs, relying on small arms and old explosives. Meanwhile, in what remained of Russia, heavily armed paramilitary groups fortified crumbling cities, holding key crossroads and vital infrastructure with brutal determination, fighting in icy winters and under permanent twilight. Across Europe, pockets of resistance emerged in scattered capitals. France's fighters focused on disrupting Zarka supply lines, while German factions attempted to protect what little remained of their technology and knowledge. In Africa, fragmented tribes and local militias took advantage of the chaos to reclaim territory, motivated more by survival than by any hope of unity or victory. But without a unified leadership or coordinated strategy, these efforts lacked the motivation and organization necessary to mount a real challenge. They fought bravely, but separately, each isolated, driven by desperation rather than shared purpose. It was becoming an annoyance. So the Zarka made a choice. To crush what spirit remained, they devised a broadcast, a calculated act of psychological warfare. They would demoralize humanity by spreading despair, by showing them that all hope was lost. This was their biggest mistake, a mistake that would not only cost them dearly, but the entire galaxy too, a mistake whose price they are still paying. The broadcast began with no preamble, no anthem, no narration, just snow. A slow pan across the white void, cold, churning, wind screaming through a narrow pass. Docklam Plateau, once a border, now a grave. Charred machines jutted from drifts of ash. Indian tanks, Pakistani APCs, Chinese launchers, burnt, gutted, twisted together. No emblems mattered anymore, the floated higher. The silence felt unnatural. And then, movement. Down below, a line of civilians, 37 of them, struggled through the gorge. They were not soldiers. They carried no weapons. Children in oversized coats, mothers holding infants, old men pushing carts through snow with bare hands. 37 souls, trying to escape a war they never asked for. They were limping, cold, exhausted, but alive. Above them an alien engine whined. The Zarka attack skimmer pierced the clouds, sleek and black, its pulse cannons glowing, its wings trailing fire. It saw them, and so did the human soldiers. From the high clouds above, the Zarka skimmer descended, sleek, black, insectoid, its underbelly glowing with pulse cannon heat. Hatches hissed open beneath its carapace, and Zarka infantry dropped to the ridge, grey-scaled, tall, armoured in chiton. They landed hard, boots crunching across the snow as they fanned out in silence. A shattered trench held less than 50 soldiers, not of one army but 3, Chinese, Pakistani, Indian, old enemies, forgotten rivalries. No one gave an order, there was no command, no time, but they all understood one thing. The skimmer was lining up a shot on civilians. No one gave an order. There was no need, every man moved. A Pakistani officer dashed through the trench, pulling spare ammo from the dead, tossing it to the Indian gunner, his hands moving faster than words ever could. A Chinese sergeant hauled up the last anti-tank round, his voice cutting across the trench as he shouted to the gunner, not caring if the words made sense. An Indian major wiped the blood from his brow and then tied his nation's flag to his belt. He saw 2 others doing the same. 3 flags, 3 men, 1 stand. They rose not to defend a position, not for strategy or victory, but to place their battered bodies between the skimmer and the unarmed lives below. They turned to face the gorge. They turned to die. The footage cut in bursts, chaotic, raw. The first volley from the skimmer tore into their line. Snow exploded. Bodies flailed. Still they held. Machine guns chattered. Rockets screamed. Mortars fired. An Indian grenadier, without a second thought, ran into the open, gun blazing, begging the enemy to look at him. They did. He died in the first volley, but his distraction let a mother carry her child to safety. A Pakistani sniper with a shattered leg kept firing. Leg shattered, breath ragged, until the last drop of blood spilled from his body and death pulled his finger from the trigger. A Chinese comms officer, barely conscious, patched into a ruined long-range transmitter and called coordinates, bringing mortar fire down on the enemy's advance, knowing it would cost him his life. Together they fought. Together they bled. Together they held the line. A single recoilless rifle fired, manned by 3 soldiers from 3 nations. One braced the mount, one sighted the target, and one called wind and range through bloodied lips. Critical hit. The skimmer shrieked, engine flaring. It jerked mid-air, then slammed into the cliffside behind the Zarka troops. Flames erupted. Alien soldiers screamed, flailing in retreat as the blast consumed them. Smoke poured from the alien wreckage. Its cannons went dark. Victory for a moment was real. For one impossible breath, it seemed they'd done it. The line held. The civilians rescued, but the drone feed continued, and through the drifting smoke something darker moved. A second skimmer. It had waited, hidden. It did not hesitate. A single pulse barrage into the cliffside above the gorge, into the civilians. There was no defense. The snow bridge collapsed. The gorge walls shattered. Avalanche, fire, screams. The camera caught a woman hugging her child in her last moments, a boy turning his head, an old man lifting his arms, and then they were gone. Buried in light, small gloved hands disappeared beneath rubble, and silence. The last thing the drone captured, torn Indian tricolour, charred Chinese red, and a wind-shredded Pakistani green. 3 flags, tattered and scorched, lying together in the snow, side by side, equal in death. The footage changed everything. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth fell silent. No more skirmishes, no more ambushes, no sabotaged patrols, no drone-jammed frequencies. The scattered, chaotic resistance that had flared across continents simply stopped. The Zarka watched with grim satisfaction. Cities already shattered remained eerily still. The bunkers they once struggled to breach stood abandoned. In the wastelands, outposts reported no movement. Even the underground networks, so infamously stubborn, went dark. It was quiet. Too quiet. But to the Zarka, it was victory. They believed the footage had worked, that despair had finally taken root, that the memory of Docklam, the futile unity, the failed sacrifice, the dead children, had extinguished the human flame once and for all. They called it complete subjugation. But you see, Earth was never conquered. It was simply punched hard enough to remember what it could become. And that broadcast was that final punch. Earth had been muted once, its skies stripped of satellites, its voice torn from the stars. But silence is not surrender. Silence is when we hold our breath before we strike. For weeks the world grieved. The footage of Docklam became scripture, a sacred pain etched into every survivor's soul. The Zarka believed they had broken humanity by showing them death, but they had done something far more dangerous. They had shown humans what unity looked like, and from that unity, vengeance bloomed. It began not with thunder, but a whisper. In ruined bunkers and flooded subways, in caves lined with chalk maps and candlelight, the finest minds Earth had ever known came together, not under flag or uniform, but a singular cause. A cyberneticist from Moscow, a strategist from Seoul, a systems engineer from NASA's last outpost in Houston, an orbital physicist from Buenos Aires, a retired ISRO technician from Bengaluru, physicists from shattered universities, tacticians who once commanded armies now turned to ash, engineers with grease-stained hands and eyes burning with fury. They came not for glory, they came to shut the gods up. They called it the Echo Protocol. 1,000 plans whispered across a resurrected world, through burst code flashes, through Morse across copper wire, through light pulses on mountaintops. Hidden nodes pulsed awake beneath ruined cities. Forgotten satellites, long thought dead, blinked back to life using patched-together fusion cores and scavenged parts. They had one mission, to return the silence, not as a cry for help, but as a blade. The Zarka had named the day themselves. 256 days since the conquest began. 256 days since Earth's skies went dark and her voice was torn from the stars. A full planetary cycle to mark their triumph. They called it the Centennial Broadcast. Across occupied territories, massive screens and black crystal towers had been erected. Drones hovered overhead like vultures, waiting for a signal. The Zarka fleet aligned in precise orbit, their command ships set to transmit to every subetheric channel, every surviving neural relay, every hacked human system. It would be a symphony of dominion. But when the hour came, nothing came. No anthem, no voice, no dominion, just silence. It began 5 hours earlier, deep beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, where glacial creeks hid the low hum of a machine no Zarka had ever conceived. Buried in a silo carved into the bones of the earth, scientists from a dozen shattered nations gathered around a singular fusion core, the size of a coffin, humming with unnatural resonance. They called it Hermes. It was not a weapon, it was a key. It sang in the language of Zarka lattice code, mimicked its packet handshake protocols, impersonated its command structures. Human code laced with alien understanding, an impossible hybrid born from burned circuits, captured drones, and months of suicidal field testing. When Hermes awoke, it didn't scream. It whispered, and in doing so it entered the Zarka's mind. Across Earth's upper atmosphere, a second act played out. 47 scavenged thruster drones, coded from mining craft, dead weather satellites, and the corpses of alien patrol vessels, drifted into position. They carried no explosives. Only pulse detonators, built in the underbelly of São Paulo and calibrated in the ruins of Warsaw. These bombs were not meant to kill. They were designed to scramble, to reach into the fragile lattice of Zarka quantum entanglement and untune it, like a piano string torn loose in the middle of a performance. One by one, in synchronized bursts, they sang the wrong note. The constellation of Zarka orbit nodes, once the skeletal system of their planetary coordination, flickered, then sparked, then failed. No visible explosions, no smoke, just sudden, terrifying disconnection. But it wasn't over. That was only the knife at the throat. The blade came from below. In the ruins of ancient cathedrals, subway tunnels, oil rigs, and collapsed telecom towers, human tacticians, engineers, and ex-hackers worked in shadow for months to create the third movement, Phantom March. False signals, decoy orders, replicated Zarka battle directives, all forged through the language of their own systems, designed to be indistinguishable from genuine command. They didn't jam communications. They replaced them. In the wastes of Algeria, Zarka armor divisions were ordered to reposition south and walked straight into minefields laid by farmers turned rebels. In what was once Alberta, Sky Fortress was convinced it was under attack by its own rear guard and opened fire on its allies. In Indonesia, dozens of aerial drones turned in unison and emptied their arsenals into empty jungle, targeting confirmed hostiles that didn't exist. Zarka units, separated by continents, all heard different orders, conflicting, contradictory. Some stood still, some marched in circles, some opened fire on nothing. The war net collapsed. Inside the command ship, the Zarka's central planetary overseer blinked its tertiary eye as system reports turned red, then black. One after another, satellite feeds dropped, ground units stopped replying. Fleet intelligence AI began to desync. Error messages scrolled faster than they could be read. Connection lost. Field order override, protocol loop detected. Identity conflict, authority disputed. And then, silence. Not jamming. Not noise. Absence. In under 7 minutes, Zarka planetary communication fell. In 10, orbital fleet synchronization collapsed. In 14, AI command behavior degenerated into protective lockdown. And by the 15th minute, the Invincible were blind, deaf, alone. Across 1,000 conquests, they had never seen it, never imagined it, never prepared for it. They had conquered worlds whose skies bled fire. They had raised civilizations that sang death through sun flares. They had extinguished empires built across gas giants, silenced hive nations that fought to their last lava. For 1,000 years, the Zarka had broken species like stone beneath tide, inevitably. And yet nothing in their long memory, no archive in their war priests' vaults, no simulation run by their cold logic engines had prepared them for this. This wasn't a rebellion. It was a reckoning, a vengeance sharpened into doctrine. And the most terrifying thing was not that the humans fought, it was how they fought. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Zarka felt it. Fear. There were no speeches, no declarations of resistance, no single leader to kill, no command chain to fracture. The uprising did not scream. It moved, quietly, simultaneously, with precision that should have been impossible for a broken world. Across 5 continents, Zarka patrols were led into ambushes down to the exact second. In the ruins of old London, a mechanized squad was lured beneath Tower Bridge, where it collapsed in perfect synchronicity, triggered by seismic charges placed 1 month earlier, planted during a feint evacuation. In occupied Tokyo, dozens of resistance cells emerged from beneath centuries-old tunnels, attacking Zarka bunkers from below, not in disorganized waves but as coordinated spear points, each striking a critical junction. In Cairo, a Zarka subcommand outpost didn't fall to an assault. It was emptied, no alarms, no explosions, just silence. When the Zarka sent reinforcements at dawn, they found the facility eerily intact, doors sealed, systems humming, monitors still looping idle status screens. But every human prisoner was gone. Every databank had been drained. Every sentry's feed had been quietly looped. Attacks synchronized down to the breath. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Forward bases reported false victories until they were burning. It was not rage. It was not desperation. It was method. The Zarka had faced resistance before, insurrections, last stands. But they had never faced a species that turned its grief into geometry, that mourned in algorithms, that retaliated with mathematics. The Zarka had never believed in the impossible, but what they were witnessing should not exist. No species had ever learned this quickly. No species had ever hit back this hard. No species had ever turned silence into a weapon and confusion into coordination. The Zarka realized too late what had been growing in Earth's silence all along. A mind. Not one of bone and blood, but a collective will forged by pain, grief, and memory. Billions of voices, harmonized without speaking. A planetary instinct, a global hunter. And now that hunter was moving through their ranks, pulling them apart one organ at a time. For the first time in their 1,000-year reign, The Zarka knew what it was to fear an enemy, not because it was powerful, but because it wasn't supposed to be. Humanity was not advanced, not united, not ready. But it had learned, and now it was teaching them what it meant to be prey. Now scattered, confused, the Zarka legions began to fray. Their strength was always in unity and coordination, and now they were severed, limb from limb. Human tacticians moved like artists now, painting war across the map with blood and brilliance. Isolated Zarka divisions were led into traps, misled by false signals, ambushed in terrain that bent to human hands. Skirmishes became victories. Victories became liberation zones. Zarka strongholds fell with poetic justice, one every hour as humans struck with the precision of a heartbeat remembered. With every victory, humanity scavenged. With every piece of shattered Zarka tech, they learned. But learning was not enough. Humans changed it, improved it, dared to understand it. What the Zarka thought was perfect became obsolete in human hands. Their plasma rifles, rewired to run hotter, faster. Their armor, stripped, melted, reforged into lighter, stronger forms. Their AI drones, given new protocols, fed Earth's own war poetry, and turned against their former masters. Factories rose from craters, cities of dust became labs. What once served conquest now served freedom. The invaders, who once marched with ruthless certainty, were reduced to scattered survivors, captured alive, their technology dissected and re-engineered. From these prisoners, humanity learned their secrets, mastering weapons and systems once thought beyond reach. What began as desperation became domination. The conquerors became the conquered. And in time, the first human-built starship pierced the stratosphere, its frame a fusion of two technologies, its purpose singular: vengeance. You see, humans are not the kind of species to simply turn away from the shadow of loss. They do not forget the billions who perished, men, women, children whose names might be lost to history but whose memories burn brighter than any star. That morning was not an anchor but a flame, rising fierce, untamed and unyielding. It forged a steel will, an unbreakable resolve to make the universe pay heed. Grief became their battle cry. Sorrow shaped their strategies. Every scar, every ruin, every broken life fueled their relentless march outward, into the cold void, into the uncharted darkness of space. For 6 centuries, humanity hunted the Zarka. No system was too distant, no world too forsaken. They moved like a storm, methodical, unstoppable, freeing every planet shackled by Zarka rule. Every victory was a vow, every conquest a promise kept. And yet when they stood at the threshold of the Zarka homeworld, weapons raised, hearts steeled, something within them chose a different path. They did not destroy, they did not exterminate. Instead, they spared the Zarka, leaving them alive as a living testament to humanity's strength and restraint. A warning, a lesson, that humanity is not a fragmented race, torn by petty divisions or fleeting rivalries. They are a singular force, born from pain, tempered in fire, united by an iron will. They endure because they must. They remember because they refuse to forget. And the Zarka, those who once saw themselves as masters of conquest, would carry this lesson through the stars for all time. That to face humanity is to face an unyielding spirit, one that does not break, does not surrender, and never lets the past fade into silence. The elder alien's gaze fixed steadily on the youngers, his voice low but heavy with meaning. Now do you understand, boy, the fire that forged humanity? The quiet strength beneath their softness? They are not peace-loving because they are weak, but because they choose to be stronger than war. And when pushed beyond all limits, they become a force no galaxy forgets. The younger alien's eyes flicked to the far corner of the canteen, where the human still sat, calm, composed, sipping his coffee, oblivious to the conversation his kind had sparked across the stars. Silence fell between the two aliens, the hum of the canteen fading into the background as the weight of history crashed over the younger alien like a tidal wave, speechless, humbled, and forever changed.